So we've created this using some more of a box modeling method and then, upresing it. We're going to do another way just to show you that there are other ways to do things like this in ZBrush. And we're going to use a totally different methodology. So we're going to append, this time we're going to append a cube 3D. Let's go down to it. I can take it out of solo mode. I'm going to turn off the one that we had made previously. A little bit in each direction. Not too worried about the depth right now. But if we were to look at this, this is kind of like a default cube that hasn't really been, it's been made into a polymesh 3D, but we didn't get a chance to do any initialization to it. But what we would do to this is to subdivide this quite a bit. Maybe let's go into geometry and we'll subdivide this, Control D, 5 subdivisions, get ourselves up to about 125,000 points. We could even do one more time, get it to 500,000. But I'm not really too worried about polyframe or anything at this point, because what I'm going to do is use the clip curve for this. And I'm going to go hold Control and Shift and then select the clip curve. And the way that the clip curve works, if you've never used it, is you hold Control and Shift just as if you were selecting something, and you draw out a line, and anything that is on the shaded side is going to be clipped out. While I'm holding this, I'm dragging, and it's going in what are 5-degree increments, and holding the spacebar will move it around. Pretty straightforward. It's a little bit of what I usually call a Vulcan death grip, because you've got Control and Shift held down, and then I'm using the space bar. But you'll see, and I'll go into polyframe mode and turn the floor off really quick. It's going to basically clip the surface and keep the geometry relatively straight, which is really what we want. That's a little bit different than, say, the trim, which trims the surface and then fills it in with something that's more like a triangulated surface, which really isn't as useful. It also doesn't really work as well for compound surface directions. You'll get this interpolated surface that looks like a potato chip kind of thing. Not really what we want. So with this, you can just go in and start to draw, and just make sure that, when you draw, you are paying attention to what your angle is and the direction in which you draw it. If you go left to right, it'll be above you. Right to left, it'll be below you. Just think about working more, left to right than anything. But if we're on the underside of the object, we're going to want to go more right to left. Now, if you want, this snaps in 5-degree increments, but if you want to, we can make that more freehand. All you got to do is just hold Control and Shift and start to draw, and then let go of Control and Shift, and it'll become a freehand curve. And after which case, you can double-click Alt and get right angle increments. And I'm going to, make this resemble what we'd made before. This particular one, I'm going to need to cut this in because of the subdivision that we had set up in the beginning. We can go ahead and activate symmetry in the Z-axis and Control and Shift and draw that down. And that should clip it in either direction. Still got some issues down in there. A little bit of a haircut. Okay, Let's go under the geometry menu and we'll go under Dynamesh. We're going to have to delete our lower subdivisions so we can just see everything as it is. Should we take the mask off if there's any mask? Take the blur down off of your Dynamesh. I'm going to turn the resolution up to about 500. Just is basically a number that it's using to reproject. And this is relatively straight topology. There isn't a lot to it. You know, it's got right angles and then flat faces. So with the geometry relatively in good shape, can turn this off, can go down to the Z remesher. This was about at 50. So once we get it to here, I mean, it's really just a matter of scaling it down a little bit to get it to the right proportion that we want depth-wise. You know, with a simple polish of maybe just like 2 or 3, you can start to round off those edges and still preserve some of the faceting that's going on. And we're talking about a feature that is small, and all we're trying to get it to do is to read this. Now, we don't have as much control over the thickness of these edges. That's something that, you know, low poly modeling, the beveling tools, you know, even using some of the edge loop tools in our geometry menu, those could be helpful for that. So if we were going to look at this, and these might be a little bit different in terms of their thickness, this is using clipping curves, and this is using low poly methods. I think the biggest difference being just some of the surface variations that I created between these two, but those could be accounted for with polygroups and with smoothing and things like that. And so at this point, you want to save out your work and, you know, take a good look at everything. Make sure that everything has been named. I would just say give these good names that make sense to you. If they make sense to you and they have a specific sort of intention, they'll be fine. So I've got a Nuka lower body, a Nuka upper body. I've got a Nuka core. Got the rib, got the band, the base of the pin, the U-hook of the pin, the base geometry of the trigger, which is not really going to be visible. We've got the actual one that was used with the Z modeler, which I'm going to use, and the one with the clipping brushes. So we can continue to model this and duplicate our subtools and add a little bit more surface features that are going to be subdivided as these thick types of beads. We're going to add another ring here that has some solidity to it, and we'll be looking at our reference again. And then we're going to be duplicating some of these bands. First and foremost, I think we're going to be creating some polygroups to assist with the subdivision of a lot of these.